Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. This is Dr. Joe Salustio back with you on another episode here to start off the new year, 2025. We've got a full schedule. We're already booked out for the first almost 4 months on a daily basis of this podcast as we continue to interview amazing leaders. In our 5th year of operation here at the EdUp Experience, 2025 marks our 5-year, the 5th year of doing these podcasts. Over 1,000 podcasts have been released to over more than 405,000 downloads of our episodes. So podcasting is a thing. If you guys haven't heard, even it's a thing for elections in the United States. Puts you in your voice directly in the ear of your listener and allows them to hear right from you how important your business is, how important your institution is, and so on. And we're glad to provide this service to higher education here at the EdUp Experience. And I've got apparently Elvin Freitas, of course, co-founder of the EdUp Experience, doesn't think one guest for me is enough. And 2 guests is not enough. No, he's scheduling me 3 people at a time to start off this new year, and we're going to get him in one at a time. First, we have Mark Ewan. Ewan, he's going to tell me, VP of Sales at IPClear. Mark, how are you? Did I say your name right or wrong?
You got it mostly. Mark Ewan.
Ewan. How are you? And you're the one that Elvin came into contact with, the brilliant Elvin Freitas at a conference recently, yes?
Yeah, we were at EDUCAUSE in San Antonio having breakfast at an AWS breakfast together and just got to talking, and I think he really liked what he heard.
And you said, who the heck is this guy? And then next thing you know, you end up with me on a podcast, right? How do you like that? That's how it works.
Yeah.
All right, we got one of your colleagues with you here, Mark. We've got John Brozowski. He's co-founder at IPClear. John, what's going on?
Nice job with the pronunciation, Joe. Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having us.
I practiced it 15 times in my head once you told me how to say it correctly. You know, by the way, these intros are actually the hardest part to get through because you got to get them right. So I start sweating. It's a whole thing. But glad to have you here, John. And we're going to hear, we're going to hear all about IPClear in just a moment. But let's bring in our higher ed expert. I would say he's an expert because right now he's implementing, I think he said 2 or 3 systems right now at his university simultaneously. He's Mark Albert. He's CIO at DeSales University. Mark, how are you?
Hi, glad to be here.
Well, glad to have you all with us. And let's start with Mark Ewan. How do you like that? And John, talk to us first about IPClear. What do you guys do? How do you do it? John, why don't we start with you, and then Mark, you can add anything in.
Now listen up.
Insights EDU 2025 is almost here. Join us February 12th through 14th in New Orleans for the most anticipated higher education marketing and enrollment management event of the year.
I like that.
Imagine 3 action-packed days filled with game-changing insights, real-world case studies, and a hands-on workshop designed to transform your marketing strategy and boost your program enrollment. Learn from speakers at Google, Meta, Reddit, MIQ Digital, and top schools across the nation. Network with industry leaders, exchange ideas, and discover the tools to drive real results. This is your opportunity to stay ahead of the competition and meet the demands of today's modern learners. Don't wait. Spots are filling fast. Mark your calendar, rally your team, and head to insightsedu.com to register now. The era of the modern learner is here, and you need to be part of it. We'll see you in New Orleans. Are you going to miss Ellucian Live this year?
I don't think so.
Exactly. So you might as well register right now at elive.ellucian.com. Ellucian Live 2025, April 6th through 9th in Orlando, Florida. Do not miss it.
Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content, invites to special events, and more? Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Do you want to get all this while helping to sustain EdUp? Then go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and become a subscriber today.
Happy to, Joe. Thank you. I'll give you a little bit of background. I'll be brief. Feel free to cut me off if I start to go long in the tooth here. For many years of my career, I ran and had the honor to build some of the largest broadband networks on the planet. I spent a long time building the Comcast network, one of the things that I was responsible for there was the optimization of the Internet Protocol version 4 address space. On a $10 million budget, Joe, I was able to recover 50 million addresses for Comcast that are today worth $3 billion. You can imagine when I left the company in 2021 that I thought this was truly just a big company problem. Until a colleague of ours in the hyperscaler space says, there's a world of customers out there, people who could really use your help. Spent about a year exploring the business, making sure we had a business model, Joe, because we didn't want to be a flash fry. We wanted to be long-term fixtures in higher ed. We had the honor to meet Mark Albert a year after we started the company, and we found that we really could deliver extreme value to the higher education community, basically by delivering for what we built for single large companies of the service provider variety, but doing it for hundreds, if not thousands, of higher ed institutions.
Mark, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I'll just say
Mark
that
E, Mark E, and Mark A. We're going to do Mark E.
Okay, Mark E. I'll just add that we came into this market and found that we'll talk about this probably more and get some input from Mark A. But there's a broker community in this environment, and we go to great lengths to tell anybody in higher ed and anybody outside of higher ed that we work with that we are not a broker. We are a managed service provider providing network transformation services that enable them to, if they choose to monetize their IPv4 address space.
Network modernization and transformation, right? Give me before we hand it over to Mark A, tell me the person who's listening that goes, what the heck are these guys talking about? Say it to me as higher ed professional administrator that's not a CIO who's sitting there going, I just got a bunch of students and I got a lot of student data and I got a lot of online students and so on. What is network modernization transformation mean?
Yeah, so the Department of Defense was the first in the internet world, and a close second was the higher education vertical market, if you will. And back decades ago, when IP address blocks were allocated, there was no crystal ball. And you fast forward to today, at an institution like DeSales, where Mark Albert is CIO, only uses in the low dozens of what we call publicly addressable IP addresses, IPv4 addresses. But they were allocated a very large block initially. So there's a lot of value because there are no more IP addresses in the registry. And we'll get into that more. But in a nutshell, in order to reclaim those assets, those digital assets, the IT department needs to go through a transformation of the network. And very simply put, we make the network faster, more efficient, more secure, and future-proof.
Mark A., tell us very quickly about DeSales University, where you're located, what you do for DeSales in a nutshell, and how you fit into this puzzle that we're putting together today.
Sure. So DeSales University is a university of about 3,000 individuals just south of Allentown, Pennsylvania, in Center Valley, PA. We are a Catholic university founded on the principles of St. Francis de Sales, hence DeSales University, where the mantra is be who you are and be that well. We have some really great healthcare programs, physician's assistants, doctorate of physical therapy, doctorate of speech language pathology, doctorate of nurse practitioner. So we have those, along with a really strong business program inside our Waterbury Riley School of Business. And we're really a very fun place to work and a great institution with a great sense of community and responsibility. So I fit into this interview podcast equation, if you will. As the CIO, I oversee the network, enterprise applications, desktop support, all those pieces of technology. And I started here 3 years ago, And when I got here, I was getting all these emails saying your network has value. And, I just followed it with the free baby grand piano offer email and the email offering to, help free up lottery winnings from some prince and some far off land. And when I started actually looking into it, I realized that indeed they were selling in the $45 to $55 per IP address price range. And we had 65,536 of those guys.
It's fuzzy math.
And so when you do the math, it's a significant number. And with that, we started really investigating it further. And through some discussions, as Marquis pointed out, about brokers, we ended up getting introduced to the guys from IPClear and went through the exercise to make it happen. So
that sounds really interesting. The universities generally even know that they have this number of IP addresses. Maybe somebody sitting in IT does, but it does not, maybe not what the value is for the overall university because they just sit there.
Yes, I believe that there's a number of people at an institution that might know how many IP addresses they have. It's generally going to be not more than one or two, probably. And I don't know that either one of those individuals would put together the value. And it is certainly not understood at the president or the CFO level. They're not aware of that unless the CFO sort of fed up through. And, I report to this, I reported at that time to the CFO, and I had that conversation with him. And when you talk to a CFO and you talk millions of dollars in revenue, as opposed to IT is usually an expense drain. Instead, I was offering a revenue opportunity. I caught his attention.
Holy crap.
That's a recording of him at the time. I actually have a recording of John Brzezowski. John, I'm going to say it over and over again, because this is a recording of you, John. I didn't know if you guys know this, but I have high-tech hacking equipment here at the EdUp Experience, and it's a recording of you, and you're talking about what this means to an institution as they're planning to maybe look into how many IP addresses they have. Maybe they're looking at another company.
I like your plan, except it sucks. So let me do the plan. And that way it might be really good.
I don't know who you said that to, John, but what is the plan? How do universities think about this? How does IPClear come in and say, hey, look, this is what we do to help you monetize this space, to clear these out, to like IPClear? I'm guessing there's something that is significant with the name.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. So if I can, hit some tips of the waves here.
By the way, aren't there? It sounds like that was you exactly on that recording.
I think Mark E set me up and sent you some preview audio of one of our internal conference calls. But truthfully, as Mark Ewan had mentioned earlier, a lot of it is education on the front end, right? Mark Albert, and Mark knows I say this about him, whether he's here or not. He has been an extraordinary, partner. I don't even call Mark a customer or a client. What a visionary, right? And we're trying to find others like Mark. We're hoping this podcast helps with that. The first step, Joe, is education, right? Helping people understand the value of their assets and how little that they're using them. Many universities, I want to say the majority of the universities that have sufficient notable address space in today are basically using roughly 1%. So there's a huge education component for us, Joe, right? That is coupled with kind of an anti-education component in making sure that people understand that we're not brokers. We are truly a hands-on turnkey managed service provider, right? So we have our own software system that we built. We have an automation process. We bring all those things to the table to help accelerate the experience for folks like Mark, right? Mark Albert, right? Once we get the party started, Joe, and I'll ask Mark Albert to chime in here in a minute, or you can, right? We take what we're hearing would be a 2+ year journey, and we boil it down to about 120 days, give or take, Mark Albert, right? And when we're talking about millions of dollars that can be realized in 120 days versus, you know, 2 years. It's a big deal, Joe. It's meaningful to a lot of institutions out there, way more meaningful than Mark, you, and I ever realized when Mark joined the team, right?
Let's go.
Yeah, I'm guessing that this is a surprise on Mark A. I'm like, universities are sitting around, as well as I do, looking at enrollment decline, demographic shifts, barriers to enrollment, confusion in the FAFSA. Is this a something that's sitting out there and you just don't even realize that you have this, you're sitting on this asset?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of institutions that just don't have the awareness that they might have this. I mean, we are part of the Lehigh Valley Association of Independent Colleges, and we checked with our other colleague schools there to see, and some of them don't have the assets. They have a much smaller pool. We were one of the fortunate institutions that many years ago put in a request to the registry, Aaron, for a block, and they gave blocks out in 65,000 piece chunks, and at no charge. So that asset is extremely valuable if you got it. A lot of schools, I believe, ended up working with their internet service provider to get a small group of blocks just to support the needs of the institution. And it has been pointed out, we were not using 65,000 blocks. We were using a lot of the IP addresses because, well, one, we didn't know any better. And two, when you have, if you think about a more of a real estate transaction and you turn 65,000 IP addresses into square feet, if you've got a 65,000 square foot home, you're putting stuff everywhere because you don't need to be strategic necessarily in how you lay out your stuff. You just, you try to do some things smart, and we would separate parts of our network so that it was secure, but we spread it out over the entire, length of the 65,000. And that was really the work piece was, IPClear helps you consolidate it down to what do you really need. So now in the real estate world, you're downsizing, you're looking for the right size house, and you start going through your stuff and you determine what stuff do I need to keep public facing, what stuff do I need to keep internally, and what stuff do I no longer need. So that's where the IPClear really was extremely helpful to enable us to work through that effort in a 5-month period, as opposed to if we did it without IPClear, it would have easily been 18 to 24 months. And we would have been asking and answering the question, what else is not getting done while we're doing this? So
like it is.
Yeah. So
by the way, I forgot to turn on my sound effects at the beginning. So you're just going to hear me, probably coming through a little bit louder. But when you think about this, my mind's kind of blown because I didn't even know that this existed. And you go in, Mark E., do you go into the university, you get in front of a university partner and you say, hey, look, you might have, how does this conversation go? Right? Like you might be sitting on an incredible asset that you don't even know exists. Like how it's like finding a treasure at the bottom of the ocean almost, for many. How does this sound? Can you tell me how this conversation takes place? Like you're on an elevator, maybe more informally than formally, right? Because I think the formal conversation probably comes after you've told somebody that there's kind of a treasure map. And how do you find out if it's there or not? You know what I mean? What does that sound like, this conversation?
Well, first of all, part of the power of our business is that, John and his team have built an incredible automation platform that can look, it's the open internet, right? So part of what the platform does is it takes a look from the outside in on any network. So we know who has what. So that makes the sales job more targeted.
But going in.
We know going in.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're focused initially on institutions that have what DeSales had, which is called a /16. As Mark A. said, it's 65,536 addresses. that were allocated to the institution by ARIN, which stands for American Registry of Internet Numbers. ARIN no longer has allocations to give because back decades ago when IPv4 was blessed as the standard, no one foresaw that the internet would explode the way it has. And that's a whole separate conversation. The world's moving to IPv6, which is a much larger namespace. But in the meantime, the entire internet needs to be backward compatible if you want your services to be globally addressable, as they say. But to get back to your question, we have a targeted sales approach, and then we have a customer journey. And the first, several phases of that journey is education, because we've been preceded by this whole broker community, which, there's some good, some bad. And frankly, we've been told by a lot of institutions that when they hear from us initially, if it's a cold approach, which we do a lot of, they don't want to hear it because they've heard it all before, and they don't believe it. They don't realize that we're different, and that what we do is actually come in and become a part of their information technology expertise layer, if you will. So we have what we call a customer journey, and the first several phases is all about education and getting them comfortable, getting them to build trust that we're not just trying to create a transaction. We're actually trying to help them go through an entire transformation that's going to prepare them for the future of the evolution of the internet, which is going from IPv4 eventually to IPv6. And someday there will be a cutover, and these addresses, the IPv4 addresses, will lose value, which frankly they have already since Mark did his transaction.
John, what am I missing okay, so IPClear knows perhaps that I'm an institution that has 65,347, whatever you said, Marky, somewhere around there, IP addresses that I bought in a block at some point. Do you, maybe I'm using some, maybe I'm using all. I feel like that would be very unlikely that I'm using all, but maybe I am. Are you consolidating information into a few versus having so many? And then am I selling off those? Am I going to sell them off? Am I going to keep them? Am I upgrading? I don't think I understand how you go from IPv4 to 6, right? Like, you guys are the experts. I'm not. But what happens to those IP addresses that perhaps I was using that I won't use anymore once you come in and consolidate efforts? I'm not even sure I'm asking the right question, to be honest. Attention, higher ed leaders. Are you ready to transform your marketing and enrollment strategy? Don't miss Insights EDU, February 12th through 14th in New Orleans, the premier conference for higher education marketing and enrollment management. Spots are filling fast. Register now at insightsedu.com. Welcome to the era of the modern learner.
Let's go!
At Ellucian Live 2025, we're going to explore the magic of innovation. We want to imagine, believe, and achieve. It's happening April 6th through 9th, 2025 in Orlando, Florida, and we're going to explore technology, modernization, and
artificial intelligence.
Explore the latest technology solutions, discover industry insights, and make valuable connections as a global community. It's time to register for Ellucian Live 2025 at elive.ellucian.com.
Do you want to get invites to special events? Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, behind-the-scenes episodes, and original content? Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Then go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and become a subscriber today.
You really are, Joe. It's almost like we planned this.
Probably not, because I have no freaking clue what I'm asking. But that's why I never worked in IT.
Yeah, and this is also, it's amazing. This is the first time we met you, so this is pretty remarkable. So just a half a step backwards. So in our system, we have a database of about 500 institutions that we know today have equal to or greater than what Mark Albert had at DeSales University. It's part of what our system does. We use that, Joe, to basically fuel what Mark Ewan called the optimization of our customers' networks, right? You need V4 to connect to the internet today, right?
Yeah.
Like it or not. So as part of our journey is we help our customers right size the allocation that they have. Mark Albert used the real estate analogy earlier. It's spot on. It is exactly the right analogy, right? And we basically use that to engineer through our automation platform an incremental migration from their old address space to a new right-sized address space. It's like finding the best movers possible. You think of us as the movers, right?
Yep.
You know, you had a bunch of stuff in your old house that was 65,000 square feet, and now we've managed to kind of help you fit that into 256 square feet, right? Perfectly, right? That's what we do, right? And we're there every step of the way. And
what do I do with the space? Do I sell that off as you're right? Am I selling off that extra
100%.
space?
So now, Joe, you have your old house in its entirety. You didn't keep the pool house because you're going to stay there. You sold the whole house because now you have a new place down the street that's the right size for you. Turns out, given our experience as a company, there are a lot of people who our reputation, they're aware of our reputation in from a past life. They want to meet Mark, and they've asked us, can you introduce us to your customers, because there are other players in the internet ecosystem, Joe, that need these addresses more than Mark Albert did, right? Or does, right? Think cloud scalers, hyperscalers, companies like that. Those are the organizations today that need the IPv4 addresses to continue their growth. And if they don't have a predictable pipeline of those, they're going to have problems with business continuity, Joe. So there's a synergy there. There's a really a match made in heaven, so to speak, right? So it works for us. It works for Mark Albert. We introduce parties together, and then they facilitate whatever makes sense for them commercially.
Mark A, when you figured this out and you contacted, or they contacted you, the guys at IPClear, was it almost too good to be true? Like, was this a believable thing? And you just go, what the heck? And when they come in and they clear up the space in the household, was it educating you or getting you familiar with the assets that you had? That they could be monetized? Like, maybe that feels to me like maybe something that I wouldn't know. Maybe most IT leaders may not know, is that I'm sitting on this asset and I can monetize it, right? Like I can use this asset to generate revenue over this period of time if I sell these assets off. It doesn't seem like that's something that would be common knowledge.
Right. And like I said, I was receiving all these emails saying your internet space has value, and they were saying $3 million and in excess of $3 million. And those really seemed too good to be true. So when finally meeting with IPClear, they helped, and no pun intended or is intended, they helped clear up that confusion and make it really understandable about how this works. Because the biggest concern that myself and the CFO had was, what happens when our IPs are gone? How do we still
feeling
function?
about this?
Right. How do we prevent not having a web presence? And they walked us through the entire process and helped us understand and made us feel comfortable that we executed on the vision. So, because there was we talk about it from a team perspective. First, my team was absolutely opposed to it.
Higher education teams aren't opposed to anything ever, Mark, eh?
No. It's somebody, I've been at 5 institutions over 30 years now. And one of the people I worked for used to say that, higher ed's like an aircraft carrier. It takes a long time to turn around. Yikes. And, so my team was really resistant. They were opposed, and I broke them down to get a little bit resistant. And then as we better understood it, then I started looking at them and say, if you got a better way of coming up with $3 million that I don't know about, I'm all ears.
Execute Order 66.
Yes.
That's the only other idea I have.
Yeah. And so the guys from IPClear helped the team see the vision. And then, like I said, they actually navigated us through it in a 5-month span. I mean, some of the things that I learned from this, like you can internally network things, and you need one public IP address to connect to the internet, and each public internet address can support up to 4 million internal connections. Not that I would ever advocate all 4 million trying to go through one connection, but that's the nature of networking, and it allows that kind of sort of consolidation that we were able to go from over 10,000 public facing IP addresses that we were using just because everything we plugged in had a public IP address to, I think, less than 55. And that made us more secure because every one of those public facing addresses, the bad actors can find them too. And so now you had 10,000 holes in the wall, and we've reduced it down to 55, so we can spend more time looking at those 55 areas of input that are dangerous and make sure that we're doing a great job of that. So we got a more secure network on the other side. We got better performance. I mean, the IPClear tools actually showed a significant increase in our performance, and we got a big check out of the other side of it too.
Standing.
Mark E. When if John mentioned 500, a list of 500 institutions or so that you have a list. I mean, if I'm a college president or somebody right now that is in a having financial difficulties, how do I know that I'm on that list? I mean, I got to call you guys, right? I mean, literally right now, I got to call up Mark and say, Mark, am I on the list, man? What do I do now? Like you've piqued my interest. I'm a college president. I'm wondering if this could be me. If I have $3 million sitting around, how do I find out?
Well, first I'll say it was 3 million or so. The market value fluctuates like a stock,
like Bitcoin
or Bitcoin, sure. So we haven't seen it go up in a while. It's come down, and like I always say, no one has a crystal ball. There will become a day where it goes to zero because IPv6 is the future, right?
But what I heard someone say earlier was, let's say hypothetically you have 65,000 of these, or just say you're going to keep 5,000 or whatever. You got 60,000 times, was it $55 or so per IP?
I think right around the time DeSales was in the market, it was in the high 40s to 50-ish
But
range.
I don't want that to be $17 when I'm ready to go. I want that to be $37 or $47 right now. So how do I move from being on the list to having this conversation about what I do?
Well, one of the things we say is that, if let's say there was a spike in the value for some reason, it's come down from the 40s recently over the last year, let's say. You want to be ready, and so what we do is we get you ready to sell, right? And so it's and no one has a crystal ball, so I always say I always forget what the old saying is about having one bird in hand is better than two in the bush, or something along those lines.
That's exactly it.
If it's still going to net you $1 million or more dollars, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. But to get back to the core of your question, we reach out to all of these institutions, but what we've found is that cold outreach hasn't really worked, and I think it's largely because some of the brokers have perhaps made contact and not been able to deliver real value. And so as a result, as Mark A was pointing out, he was very dubious. It sounded too good to be true. And so for us, the trick has been to go through warm introductions. And so we've been partnering. For an example, we have, if you go to our website, IPClear.co, we have a press release recently with an institution called the Council for Independent Colleges.
Yeah, I know it.
We recently did a webinar where Mark Albert joined, and as a result of that, there were a pretty large number of institutions who were invited who we knew had at least 1/16 who prior to coming to that webinar were very dubious. Too good to be true. The broker can't, do what we need them to do from a technical perspective. And then when they heard, the webinar, attended the webinar, they wanted to give it another look. And that's where, coming back to our customer journey, we're in, education phase or beyond with quite a large number of institutions now.
You just made the list.
Whoever you are out there on that 500, I want to say that maybe the persona is, you think about this from an IT perspective, and a CTO or CIO is the person who's going to execute on this, has the assets. But if I'm a college president or I'm leading the financial future of my institution, I have a lot of interest in something that has an M behind it at any level. Yep. Especially if that could be a year of operating expense for some institutions. It could be the difference between layoffs this year or not, or next year, depending on how long it takes to go through and clear these up if I sell these assets off. John, if I'm a college president, how should I be thinking right now?
I'll echo Joe a little bit about what Mark said. This sort of work, even though the time frame that Mark Albert described was pretty compressed, from 2 years down to 5 months, right? Those are still 5 months, right? Planning is essential, Joe, right? So what we're finding is it's most important for the leadership of the institution just to simply know what options they have available to them, right? One of the first questions I asked Mark Albert when I first met him was, does a couple $1 million matter to the university? The answer was resounding, absolutely, right?
I can guarantee you that that's a yes.
Yeah, but you remember where I come from, Joe, right? I'm not a higher ed guy, and everybody on this phone call knows it, including you, right? But we're here to serve higher education. So I've learned a lot over the years, right? I come from a company, multi-billion-dollar company, so like a couple $1 million.
$2 million was somebody's little tiny budget somewhere, right?
Exactly.
For an institution, it could be survival or death right now.
Exactly, right. And the money we're learning goes to a lot of different places. Everything from investment back in the infrastructure, investment in programs, paying off debt. All these different things, right? So I think we're trying to be good servants, right? Seriously, right? And we just want to educate and inform and help make sure that the leadership of these institutions are making educated decisions based off on what they have available to them. We often hear a lot of folks say, "Well, we need the addresses." We know pretty clearly what an institution does and does not need based off of the relationship that we have with them once we kind of get the party started. And I think it's really about making informed, interactive decisions, right? If this is one of these things that gets delegated off, unlike what Mark Albert did, the outcome is uncertain, right? And our biggest fear, and I'll pause after this, Joe, is that money gets left on the table or never sees the table, right? And that really kind of concerns us for the future of some of these institutions.
So to put that in terms that me and my colleagues would understand who are not technologists is eventually, Mark E said it, when there's a cutover from IP4 to IPv4 to IPv6, essentially my IPv4 addresses could be worth zero.
Yeah, and we think that's a ways off, but again, nobody knows. Nobody knows. The transformation's been ongoing for quite some time.
Yeah, but it could be 3 years off, in which case I could make this transformation in 3 years. Could be 5 years off, but why would I want to wait that long?
Yeah,
right.
And I'll make one other comment. There are schools, institutions that are struggling, and if they have this, it's almost, you could call it a no-brainer. Like, this is something we can come in and help them with immediately. But let's talk about schools that aren't on that, on that spectrum. Like, I sat down in the office. I got a warm intro through another Joe, good friend of mine, to a president of one of the most. I'm based in Palo Alto, California. One of the most successful schools in California. Sat down in the president's office, and he said, we're thriving, and things are getting better. and we realize that other institutions are going the opposite direction. But does $1 million matter to me? Absolutely, it does. And because I always have projects that are on the sidelines. So I think, this is applicable to any institution that's sitting on large blocks of legacy IPv4.
Yeah. Could be the difference of keeping a program, keeping a fact. I mean, there's just so many things. The higher ed's cutting right now. It's unbelievable. John, you kind of piped up there for a second. Is there something we missed?
Yeah, Joe, lots of this, for 44 minutes now, we've been talking about V4. We mentioned V6 a couple of times. I think it's important to just give a little bit more of a shout out to V6. So myself and, one of the other founders of IPClear, a lot of the work that we've done in the V4 space, we used V6 as a result. So the work I described to you all at the beginning of this conversation, where I recovered a large quantity of V4 address space, we did that using V6. So we made V6 a reality. We're making V6 a reality for Mark Albert at DeSales. We're happy to tell you that every one of our customers is asking for IPv6. So while we're helping to provide the optimization on the V4 side, we're also laying the groundwork for them to be future-proof from a V6 point of view. I think between the two of us, myself and one of the other partners here, we've probably enabled over 1 billion devices using V6, right? And that's across several different companies. So we're pleased to bring that experience to folks like Mark Albert and his colleagues across the higher ed ecosystem.
Well, let's get some final words in before we close out this episode. Mark, anything else you want to say about DeSales University and your partnership with IPClear?
Just that, like I said, I've been in higher ed over 30 years now, and I've been at 5 institutions. I've generally had more of a reputation of removing vendors from my ecosystem because I see that they're not getting the job done for me. It's very rare that I'm out there actually speaking on behalf of a vendor, and it's because they actually worked for DeSales. I felt like they had DeSales' best interest in mind the entire time. I get nothing for this. I'm an employee of DeSales. I get nothing from the guys at IPClear, but my board of trustees loved what the outcome was.
Oh, I bet they did.
So, it seems counterintuitive to think that this is actually a real asset that people are sitting on that they don't know about. And it's kind of like having lithium buried underneath your house and you just never drilled down to see it. Finding it and selling it and realizing the value, it made a difference to, we did it all in one fiscal year. So it made a difference to one fiscal year nicely. And, now the board looks at me not as the guy that just keeps coming to them for money all the time. I'm the guy that actually brought a significant amount of revenue. So that's not what CIOs normally do.
Yeah.
So, I highly encourage, if you're a president, go talk to your CIO, talk to your CFO, because it is there. It's real. And it almost seems, like it can't be this easy.
It's a fairy tale. It's a real fairy tale.
It really is. So,
Mark E., what else do you want to say about IPClear?
Well, I'll just say, John and I have known each other for a long time. We did work together in the digital transformation, IoT, sensor network world when he was at Comcast. And I think the world of him. He's a true expert. And, I feel lucky to be a part of this, and any institution that gets a chance to work with John and the team that he's built in terms of the development team, I think are going to be as pleased as Mark Albert has been.
Well, John, it sounds like you got a lot of influence out there. Don't be messing around with EdUp experiences IP addresses. That's all, this podcast must persist, my friend.
I'll behave, Joe.
All
No
right.
sweat.
What else do you want to say, John, about IPClear?
You just made the list.
Mark your calendars for Insights EDU 2025, February 12th through 14th. Insights EDU 2025 is the can't-miss higher education marketing and enrollment management conference of the year. We're taking over New Orleans with speakers from Google, Meta, Reddit, MIQ Digital, and top schools across the country. Discover how AI is transforming marketing and enrollment management, how to assess online program opportunities, and meet the demands of today's modern learner. Don't wait. Spots are going quickly. Register now at insightsedu.com. Welcome to the era of the modern learner.
Let's go.
Lucian Live is taking place April 6th through 9th, 2025 in Orlando, Florida.
You just made the list.
Get ready for an unforgettable experience at Lucian Live 2025. Join visionary leaders from institutions worldwide as we dive into groundbreaking ideas, cutting-edge solutions, and transformative best practices that will ignite your passion for innovation. This is your chance to connect, collaborate, and propel your institution into the future. Do not miss out.
Let's go.
Do you want to accelerate your professional development? Do you want to get exclusive early access to ad-free episodes, extended episodes, bonus episodes, original content? That's right, original content, invites to special events, and more? Do you want to get all this while helping to sustain EdUp? Then go to edupexperience.com. That's EDUP experience.com and subscribe today.
I mean, Joe, thank you, Mark Albert. As always, thank you, Mark, you, and thanks for pulling this together. You know, we're hopeful, Joe. We're very encouraged. As Mark Ewan described earlier, we're working hard to make sure that we get a very clear message out to folks that we wish to serve. I've served millions of customers in my over 30 years doing this, millions, right? Mark Albert is in the top 0.5% of like visionaries, right? So we want to serve more folks like Mark, and we're looking forward to it.
If I'm listening to this and I go, how do I proceed? Do I contact somebody, hit a website? Mark E., you probably know best right now. Do I call you directly? What do I do next?
Yeah, please call or text me at 415-505-5777, 24/7 by 365. I'll respond.
Wow. That's kind of rare. Somebody gives out their digits here. Make sure you call between the hours of 12 a.m. and 6 a.m., everybody. No, I'm sure he will probably take your call then too. But call, text Mark if you're interested, at the very least, to find out if this is something that you have available at your institution. Seems like an absolute no-brainer to have this conversation. It's been an honor to have you guys on. We've got Mark, we've got John from IPClear, and we've got Mark Albert from DeSales University. Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd.